Hello, I am the Understudy, and this is the channel where we discuss everything musical theater related. Today, we are reading Barron's AP Music Theory 3rd edition by Nancy Fuller-Skagen, BME. This is a long and extensive book, and I'm working my way through it to learn more. These videos are a way for me to organize my own journey, but I'm very happy that you're here with me. Before we start, if you have a question throughout, type them in the comments and I will see what I can do. Now, this is part 14, Harmonic Progression, part 2, the process. The vocabulary for this chapter: creating and using the roadmap, deceptive cadence, doubling notes in the triad, mode mixture, motion, including contrary motion, similar motion, parallel motion, oblique motion, and then we have parallelism, Picardy third, resolution rules, secondary dominance and secondary leading tones, and unequal fifths. Part writing requires knowledge of melody, interval, triads, inversions, seventh chords, cadences, non-chord tones, figured bass, chromatic harmony, resolution tendencies, and counterpoint, as well as what is typical and or prevalent for the common practice period. Practicing this skill is an ideal way to reinforce all these concepts. In this chapter, we complete our discussion of harmonic composition with 7 more challenging part writing examples and 4 additional exercises that are comparable to those found on the AP Music Theory exam. Let's start. Part writing and figured bass example. Example 1. Figured bass in E flat major. We begin part 2 with a realization of a figured bass in E flat major. This process requires the student to identify the figured bass symbols with the bass line, convert symbols to Roman numerals and compose the melody, and fill in the alto and tenor lines. The bass line is given. This is an example that uses 3 second inversion triads and introduces the submediant triad and the deceptive cadence. Here we have a pedal. Let's see if we can get this. There we go. We have a pedal second inversion, a passive second inversion, and a cadential second inversion. What do we know for sure? The notes in the bass line have no Arabic numeral figures marked with arrows. Let me see these. And our root position triads, including the last chord built on the C. The chord with the figured bass 7 is a root position in 7th chord. It's a root position 7th chord. As explained earlier, figured bass symbols are numbered and or symbols that represent the interval above the bass that are chord members. In this example, there are 2 first inversion triads, 3 second inversion triads, and 1 first inversion 7th chord. Step 1. Add the Roman numeral chord symbol and inversions. Write the progression below the figured bass. Create the roadmap, including the resolutions arrows for doubling reminders. If you want to pause and do that on your own, you can do that now. Let's reveal the answer. Notice that the subdominant second inversion chord between the 2 tonic chords in measure 1 creates a pedal, oblique motion in the bass. This type of second inversion chord is sometimes called an auxiliary second inversion or a neighbor second inversion because the pedal in the bass will create a neighboring relationship in one of the other voices. Another important aspect of this example is the second inversion dominant 7th chord that we have here, progressing to an inverted subdominant chord that provides an opportunity to put the resolution rule 3 into action. The chordal 7th of any 7th chord resolves down or by steps to hold it until it can. The usual resolution of the dominant 7th chord is tonic or submediant. In this example, the second inversion dominant chord resolves to the first inversion subdominant. Therefore, the 7th of the chord, fa, cannot resolve downward. There is no mi in the subdominant chord. So the 7th, the A flat, holds until it can revolve. Step 2, write the melody. Pause if you want to do that, and otherwise we have this now. This melody starts on mi, the 3rd, moves by step, reaching a peak at the cadence and extending the soprano to an E flat 5. The cadence is deceptive, ending on a submediant. The progression moves toward a tonic ending, but instead cadences with the tonic substitute, the submediant, deceiving your ears and ending in a minor instead of the expected major. There is only one occurrence of a parallel motion, but what is created is parallel thirds between the bass and the soprano, and that is not a problem. Avoid additional parallelism at this point by using contrary motion when writing the alto and tenor. So step 3, fill in the alto and tenor at the same time. Here we have their example showing now. So here we have a parallel thirds between the soprano and bass, which is acceptable. And here they have marked the dominant and the submediant that are adjacent chords that will create a parallelism if you double the root, so double the third and the submediant. Okay. Step 4, check your work. Check the correct chord members, the resolutions, including the chordal seventh on the A flat until you can resolve to G. Double the fifth in the second inversion chords, no parallel fifths or eighths, and check the spacing. In measure 1, the G, A flat, G in the soprano and the B flat, C, B flat in the tenor is neighboring relationship that is this type of second inversion chord creates against the pedal in the bass. Let's move on to example 2. So here is example 2, figured bass in F minor. This next example is in F minor, carefully observed in the figured bass symbols. We have an arrow here that says this example uses a common figured bass symbol for third inversion dominant seventh chord. Carefully look to see the 4 plus sign there, which means that the fourth note above the bass is raised. Here, this arrow says that two adjacent chords can create parallelism because each chord member is a step away. Use contrary motion. So, step 1, write the Roman numeral chord symbol and the roadmap. Here we have it. Since this is in the minor key, the half steps are between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. In our resolution chart, the 6 lay or D flat goes to 5 or so in C, especially in outside voices. Notice the stepwise descending bass line. We have do, la, so, fa, me, 1, 6, 5, 4, 3, or tonic, first inversion, subdominant, dominant. We have the third inversion, dominant, seventh, and the first inversion tonic, created in the progression in measure 1. You're on your own to follow the roadmap and complete this example. Now, let's step 2. Write the melody. When you have finished and you only have the bass and soprano, like this, check for parallel fifths and octaves. So this is an example of what this might look like. Note that the third inversion dominant seventh chord resolves to a first inversion tonic, and that the first inversion dominant chord in measure 2 is a passing second inversion chord. Second inversion dominant chord in measure 2 is a passing second inversion. The bass line is mostly conjunct and ends with fa, so, do. Here is one possible solution. That's the beauty of composition. There are many possible correct answers. In this solution, the dominant seventh chord at the cadence is complete. Therefore, the final tonic chord is incomplete. Example 3. Let's see if it gives us example 3. Well, actually, it skipped this one here. So let's go on to example 4 then. So example 4, part writing to the Roman numerals in A minor. So the example that was skipped here is example 3, which is part writing to Roman numerals in F major. So this is a similar process, going through watching each of these Roman numerals and writing first the bass and then the melody and then the tenor and alto voices at the same time. Okay, so let's go through this example 4, part writing to the Roman numerals in A minor. So what do we know for sure? The second measure ends with a half cadence, and the final cadence is a plagal, meaning the subdominant to tonic. Because of the half cadence, you're essentially starting again in the third measure, so that the resolutions from the dominant to the submediant from measure 2 into measure 3 are not imperative. A new phrase means a new beginning. We have included the supertonic triad and the supertonic seventh half diminished chords. So step 1, complete the roadmap. Include doublings and resolution reminders at the baseline. So let's start with this and the baseline. Do this on your own on the space provided. I've already given you the answers. So the second inversion dominant chord in measure 1 and the second inversion tonic in measure 3 are both passing chords and are on weak beats. The second inversion tonic chord is in measure 2 is a cadential second inversion, positioned on a strong beat. The seventh on the chord is in the seventh of the chord in the half diminished supertonic chord A doesn't resolve to G sharp because the usual resolution chord 5 or dominant does not follow. so hold the A in the same voice. Step 2, write the melody. There are many places where parallelism may occur because there are many chords with roots a second apart and therefore chord tones that are also adjacent. Contrary motion whenever possible at these places. So it might look like this. So step 3, fill in the alto and the tenor at the same time. So the question is, what's more important, the line or the harmony when it comes to doubling? The answer, the line. Avoid parallelism by using contrary motion and try to use the closest chord member. This might look like this. Notice that in the third chord we doubled the root, having the alto and soprano sing unison A. And then we doubled the third of the chord in the supertonic. Although there are parallel fifths between the bass and the tenor as noted above, because a new phrase begins after the fermata, this is not considered to be an error. The C in the tenor that creates the parallel fifths was chosen because it leads better to the E in the next chord. However, if this was not a cadence, we had to avoid the parallel fifths. The best choice would be to double the A in the tenor. Our alto sings the A line. Let's go on to example 5. Figured bass realization in G minor, including a Picardy third. The next figured bass example in G minor has a progression dominant to submediant where the roots are a second apart. That will create parallelism if you double the root. So, double the third in the submediant. This will also strengthen the feeling of the tonic as the third of the chord is Do. It also includes a pedal second inversion chord and a half diminished supertonic seventh chord. So here we have this. I edited it earlier, but we will talk about it a little bit for now. So what do we know for sure? We know in measure 3 the chord changes on B2. The bass note does not change. But because the figure is added, the 6th, the harmony above the C changes to the supertonic. Try it in first inversion. On the 4th beat, the 7th is added to the dominant chord. The final chord features the most common form of mixture, the Picardy third. The natural sign in the figured bass means the chord is G, B flat, D, borrowing from the parallel major. The Roman numeral must reflect this as well as the use of accidental in the composition. So step 1 is to add the Roman numeral progression and the road map. Use the space above where we did not have the space here, so let's see. We already have added all of these here. And step 2 is to write the melody. You can do this by yourself. I will move on to step 3 as written here. Fill in the alto and tenor at the same line. This might look something like this. Okay, let's move on to the 6th example. Figured bass in D major using mode mixture. So what do we know for sure? Because there is a flat sign used in a figured bass in a major tonality, we know that it's a borrowed chord. You can see the little arrow here. The figured bass tells us that it is a root position 7th chord and the 7th is lowered. The chord is spelled C sharp E G B flat, which is not a chord found in D major. However, it is in the parallel minor, D minor. This is an example of mode mixture. The chord is fully diminished 7th chord borrowed from the parallel harmonic minor. It does not resolve to a D minor chord in this example. It resolves to a D major tonic chord. So, step 1, add the Roman numeral progression. Continue to use the roadmap if this is helpful to you. You may also find it helpful to write in the required accidentals above the staff as a reminder. This is what this might look like. We could also, above here, write the B flat. The leading tone chords will have 3 resolution tones. Note the only difference between these 2 chords is that the 7th is in the fully diminished chord B flat and the half step lower than in the B natural in the half diminished chord. Step 2, write the melody. You can do this by yourself. Step 3, fill in the alto and tenor at the same time. So check the resolution imperatives. Remember that the arrows in the finished progression are resolution tones properly solved. So with all the notes, it might look something like this. Notice that in the boxed area, there are parallel fifths between the alto and tenor. They are unequal fifths, which are acceptable if it is a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth. In the tonic triad, the interval is a perfect fifth. In the leading tone 7th triad, the interval is diminished fifth. An accepted alternative to avoid the fifth is to move the tenor to an F sharp, doubling the third in the tonic triad. Unequal fifths from diminished 5 to perfect fifth are not acceptable in common practice style, only from perfect to diminished. We were able to end on our favorite melody ending, mi, re, do. It is becoming increasingly common to see the use of secondary or chromatic harmony, particularly in free response 6, requiring the ability to 1. Correctly identify the symbol and their resolution chords, 2. Correctly determine the chord members, 3. Correctly determine the appropriate resolutions in the temporary key, and 4. Correctly part write the chords within the given harmonic context. Example 7. Part writing to the Roman numerals in D minor, including chromatic harmony. So step 1, create the chord stack. Add the doubling reminders, resolution arrows, and circle the notes that will be in the bass line as indicated by the inversion. Here is this. The second dominant is it's a first inversion of the dominant, I think. Okay, a temporary, let's see if that is true. C, E, A, C, E, G. No, this one. That might be true. I'm not sure. Our temporary tonic is in the key of A major, the dominant of our original key. The chord is spelled E, G sharp, B natural, D. With the G sharp in the bass, we have the inversion there. There are also two notes that are not diatonic in D minor, the G sharp and the B flat. Don't forget the accidentals. Try writing them above the staff. This might look something like this. And then I cut out the things because I don't really feel like we need them. But if you wanted, you could do a C sharp here, a C sharp here, a G sharp, and a B natural, and a C sharp. So step 2, write the melody. Use contour motion when possible. Observe the resolutions, especially if they are used in outer voices. This might look something like this. Step 3, fill in the alto and tenor at the same time. Might look something like this. So double the third here to avoid parallelism. Step 4, check your work. Correct chord members, resolution including secondary dominant to the temporary tonic, no parallel fifths or eighths, spacing. So chord 3 has 2 roots, 2/3, and no fifth. This is acceptable as the triad is in root position. Moving the tenor up to the D puts him in a position to move smoothly down to the C sharp and back to D. Leaving the tenor on A would also be acceptable. Okay, answering free response part writing questions. The last 4 examples in this chapter will be very similar to what you might see on the AP exam in difficulty as well as length. You will always have 6 chords to complete in both free response 5, realizing figure bass, and free response 6, part writing to the Roman numerals, so length is never a variable. Free response 5 is example 1 in C minor. So what do we know for sure? There are 4 root position chords and 3 inverted chords, 2 chords with an added 7th, and 2 chords that will require an accidental. So step 1, determine the Roman numerals and inversion chords symbols to create the roadmap, if you find that helpful. You may also find it helpful to continue circling the notes that should be in the bass according to the inversion symbols, because it confirms the correct chord member and inversion. A system of checks and balances might look like this. And you can also, if you wanted to, write the B natural above here and the B natural above here, just as a reminder. Connect the dots. Note that the leading tone is B natural. The third inversion 7th chord resolves to the first inversion tonic, and the supertonic 7th chord is half diminished and resolves to the dominant chord. The cadence is deceptive. The dominant chord resolves to the major submediant, therefore T must resolve to Do. The 7th of the supertonic chord must resolve downward. So step 2, write a melody that uses primarily contrary motion to the bass line. It might look something like this. Step 3, fill in the alto and tenor at the same time. Double check accidentals to ensure correct chord quality. This might look something like this. So the added F in the alto is the penultimate, next to last chord, is not only a passing tone, but also a 7th of that chord. If this was required by the figured bass, the figures below the staff would be 8, 7. But it's not required, it's simply an option that they choose to do. Okay. Free response 6, example in G major. So what do we know for sure? This example contains a secondary dominant in the key of the submediant. In this case, our temporary tonic is E minor, the submediant of G major. It also contains a 4-3 suspension over the last chord. Because the last chord is the tonic chord in G major, the note in the bass is G, making the suspension C, a fourth above G, to B, a third above G. Step 1. Determine the chord stack. When determining secondary chords, identify the resolution chord first, because this will be your temporary tonic. Then identify the secondary chord. So create the chord map. This is not shown in the book, but you can circle a note that would be in the bass according to this inversion symbols. Next, we have writing the bass line. This might look something like this. So which chord is submediant in G? E minor. Which chord is the dominant in E minor? What is a 4-3 inversion? These are questions that you should know. The horizontal figure 4-3 over here represents the interval of the fourth resolving to a third above the base of the last chord, a 4-3 suspension. Step 2, write a great melody. Might look something like this. You see these little lines here. For these three, they have a note that says the most common bass line ending. So, so, do is created when they use the most common cadential progression, which is this one. So why not use the melodic pattern that goes with it, the mi, re, do? Then we have a little thing on these two chords that says, remember the tendency notes that must resolve. Do so in the key of the temporary tonic. So here we have the ones that must resolve. Step 3, fill in the alto and tenor at the same time. This might look something like this. So measure, I also added these, yes, of course. Measure 3 contains unequal fifths between the tenor and the alto. Perfect fifth to diminished fifth, which is acceptable. Remember, perfect to diminished fifth? Yes. Diminished to perfect? No. Let's go to example 2 of free response 5 in B minor. So what do we know for sure? There are only 2 root position chords. There are 3 chords with an added 7th, and 2 of those are inverted. The 5th chord in this progression is second inversion. The figured bass tells you the double note that is in the bass, 8 or octave. On beat 2, the second measure, the notes above the bass each resolve downward by a step. The 8 resolves to 7, 6 resolves to 5, 5 to a third above the 4 to a third above the bass that is raised, in this case to the A sharp. Although the A is the same note as beat 1, the F sharp, although the bass is the same note as beat 1, F sharp, the chord symbol will change because the intervals are different. There will be 2 added accidentals. As a reminder, write the accidentals above the staff. So step 1, determine the Roman numerals inversion and symbols and create the road map. We would also have an added accidental above here with the A sharp and A sharp here as well. So the leading tone's 7th chord is in its first inversion and will have 3 resolutions. Because the half diminished supertonic chord is not followed by a dominant chord, the 7th of the chord must hold the B until it can resolve upward to the A sharp. Step 2, create a great melody in contrary motion where possible. This might look something like this. So when motion between the bass line and the melody is mostly contrary, you will greatly reduce parallelism between those 2 voices. But don't forget to check inside voices when you have completed all 4 voices. Note that once again our bass line is so, so, do, so we write what goes with that in the melody. Me, re, do, or do, ti, do, or so, fa, me. Step 3, fill in the chords with the alto and tenor at the same time. Be sure to add accidentals when needed and remove all tendency notes. This might look something like this. Let's look carefully at our realization. In the tenor voice in measure 1, we have a written diminished fourth between the D and the A sharp. That would be a 2-point deduction in a voice leading between chord 1 and 2 for writing a dissonant interval in the tenor voice. So how can we solve this without starting all over and changing the melody? The solution in this case is to create 8 notes on beat 2 in the tenor using C sharp and A sharp, both members of the chord, and eliminating the diminished fourth. Once again, we see that when we have a complete 7th chord, as we do in the penultimate chord, the second to last, the chord that follows is not complete. It contains 3 roots and the third. This occurs when correctly following the rules of resolution. What about adding non-chord tones? Keep it simple. You do not get extra credit for adding non-chord tones. This is a timed exam. You only have 45 minutes to do both free response 5 and 6, plus harmonizing a melody, free response 7. The College Board suggests 15 minutes for free response 5, 10 minutes for free response 6, and 20 minutes for free response 7. Let's look at example 2 of free response 6 in A major. In this last example of our part writing Roman numerals, begin by determining what you know. So what do we know for sure? There is a secondary dominant 7th chord in first inversion followed by a second inversion in tonic triad. Since this secondary dominant does not resolve to the temporary tonic, spell the temporary tonic to confirm your work, then spell the dominant in that key. So, step 1, create the chord stack. Circle the notes that will be in the bass according to the inversions. Might look something like this. Notice that the leading tone triad, it is in the first inversion, resolves to the tonic first inversion, and has 2 resolutions. I'm talking about this one right here. Step 2, create a melody. Use contrary motion when possible. It might look something like this. Step 3, fill in the alto and the bass at the same time. Sorry, this should say alto and tenor, and this reads wrong. Fill in the alto and the tenor at the same time. Be aware of parallelism and check and recheck your roadmap for resolution and added accidentals. Might look something like this. Part writing requires knowledge of melody, intervals, triads, inversions, and 7th chords, cadences, non-chord tones, figured bass, chromatic harmony, resolution tendencies, and counterpoint, as well as what is typical and or prevalent for the common practice period. Practicing this skill is an ideal way to reinforce all these concepts. All of these examples in this chapter can also be found in Appendix C, but I have not included them, but if you want to practice. So let's talk a little bit about scoring. Let's talk about the most common errors and how to avoid them. Free response 5 is a part writing by realizing figured bass. Free response 6 is a part writing to the Roman numerals. Free response 5's possible high score is 25, and free response 6's is 18. Both are scored similarly, with 1 point awarded for the correct chord spelling and 2 points awarded for each connection between the chord voice leading. Let's look at a short example to demonstrate the couple of critical issues. So, in this example, as you see on the screen now, it is an E minor. Therefore, the dominant or the dominant 7th chords must have the raised 7th scale degree, in this case, D sharp. Students lose more points for this error, omitting the accidental, than for any other, and it is a critical mistake. Without the sharp sign, the chord is spelled incorrectly, and that means 1 point deduction or 0 points added, plus because the chord is misspelled, there are 0 voice leading points into chord 2 and 0 points out of chord 2. That is what our graders called a triangle effect. So here we have the chord spelling points awarded for the chord, and then we have the voice leading points awarded because this is not to the right note. So you are losing 3 points. By omitting just 1 accidental, 5 points are lost. Oh, interesting. Oh, because, okay, I don't know how 5 points are lost in that. Anyways, now let's look at another common mistake in chord 3. This root, yes, so this chord has 2/3, 2/5, but no root. In a root position triad or 7th chord, it is acceptable to omit the 5th, but not an inverted chord, and never omit the root. This would be considered incorrect chord spelling, and once again, 0 points are awarded for chord spelling or voice leading. Chords 4 and 5 are both spelled correctly. The dominant 7th chord has the accidental, and both resolutions are correct. However, another major error has occurred. There are parallel fifths between the bass and the tenor. This happened because the final tonic contains all 3 chord members. So many progressions end in the dominant 7th to 1 or major or minor tonic. So here's the rule to remember. When root position dominant 7th chord goes to root position tonic major or minor, if the root position dominant 7th chord has all 4 members, then the tonic chord will have 3 roots, 1/3, and no fifths. If the dominant seventh is not complete, leaving out the fifth and double the root, then that will lead you to a complete, all three chord members, tonic triad. There are two ways this could have been corrected, so let's move on to this example. In this example, the final tonic chord has three roots, E, and 1/3, G. We also have this example, where the dominant seventh chord does not have a fifth. The root is doubled, B, and there is the third, D sharp, and the seventh, A. The tonic chord is now complete with all three members, E, G, and B. So, would these three critical errors affect our score on just chord spelling and voice leading? Let's see. So, here we have a square, we have the chord spelling points, and 0 voice leading points. So let's see, chord 1 is always given, so there are no chord spelling points awarded. So possible high score of this short example for chord spelling, 4, and voice leading, 8, means 12. What they have been given here is a score of 2, with only 2 chord spelling points. Let's move on to some additional practice examples. So here we have the first one. I suggest that you look at this example, grab some staff paper or something to write on, and try this example out. Pause the video here, and I will show you the answer now. This is what this might sound like, or might look like. Example 2, pause the video to try it out. And here's the answer. We have example 3, and the answer. And example 4, and we have the answer right here. Okay, chapter summary. Review of resolutions. When the dominant goes to the submediant major or minor or the tonic major or minor, then T resolves to Do. When the dominant seventh or the diminished leading tone triad or the diminished seventh leading tone chord goes to the tonic major or minor or the submediant major or minor, then T resolves to Do and Fa resolves to Mi. In any seventh chords, the seventh of the chord resolves downward by a step or holds until it can. Other resolution considerations. So, note that the first inversion of the dominant chord or the first inversion of a dominant seventh chord resolves to the tonic. The third inversion resolves to the first inversion of the tonic. So we have major and minor and leading tone seventh. Did I write this in there? No, I did not. We have a little chart here. Leading tone seventh chords are typically found in first inversion or second inversion. Root position and third inversions are not common. Okay, do not add non-chord tones in part writing or figured bass realization. Do not double the leading tone. Double the fifth in second inversion chords. The dominant and the submediant are adjacent chords that will create parallelism if you double the root because each chord member is a step away. So double the third in the submediant triad and use contrary motion. Sometimes the final chord in minor mode will feature the most common fourth of mode mixture, the Picardy third. The sharp or natural sign in the figured bass means to raise the third of the tonic triad, borrowing tonic from the parallel major. The Roman numeral must reflect this as well as the use of the accidental in the composition. Leading tone chords will have 3 resolution tones. Note the only difference between the half diminished and the fully diminished is that the seventh is the fully diminished chord is a half step lower than the half diminished chord. About unequal fifths. So a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth is acceptable. A diminished fifth to a perfect fifth is not acceptable in common practice style. It is becoming increasingly common to see the use of secondary or chromatic harmony, particularly in part writing to the Roman numerals, the free response 6, requiring the ability to correctly identify the symbol and the resolution chord, correctly determine the chord members, and correctly determine the appropriate resolution in the temporary key. And that is the end of part 14, I believe, Harmonic Composition Part 2, The Process. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a long episode, and if you like what you see or you want to learn more, or you just like hanging out with me or whatever, please subscribe. And I would be honored if you subscribe. And if you have any questions, you can leave them down below, and I will get to them as soon as possible, I promise. And I will see you in the next one. Hop on over to the quiz or to another video. Thank you.